Well, carrying on with the Norfolk theme and also doing a test on some watercolour paper the s.a.a. gave me, I'm going to do a great Crested Grebe, and this time in watercolour. And all I'm going to need today are my oval mop, a Pro Art oval mop, a little brush called a silver rake, this large one, again another specialist brush from the s.a.a. because it's going to be ideal for the feathers, and a size 5 and a size 2 watercolour brush. I'm going to also use a little bit of masking fluid from your applicator, which is ideal for little bubbles and things around here. And that's it, my standard set of watercolours here, and palette, and of course water, and that's all I should need for this painting. So I'll take you close up to this and we'll look at some of the special techniques we can use to get these effects.
Now the first thing I'm going to do is use the masking fluid applicator to drop these little blobs and dashes of masking fluid where the bubbles are going to go sparkling on top of the water. This is normally done with the board flat, but as I'm working vertically here I thought I'd just do that to show you. We're not going to be doing any fine lines with this, just these little water droplets, just these little bubbles.
Masking fluid's now dry enough to work on. So we'll make a start. And we'll do the bird first, I think, and paint the water afterwards. So I'm going to start with my medium round brush. And we want to work in watercolour from the lights to the dark. So we're going to work up from the whitey areas to the darkest ones. And there'll be a bit of texture on this as well. Working on a fairly small scale here, so I've got to use fairly small brushes. The beak here has a slightly purple tint to it, so I'm going to take a little bit of alizarin and just bring that across the beak thinly first of all, to give that a thin wash. Remember that the wash is the first coat we do, and any transparent coat after that over it is called a glaze. So this is a thin wash of that. I'm going to take a little bit of Prussian blue and a wee touch of burnt sienna to go into that, which will make it slightly darker, and just drop it. I'm working on the vertical here, so I'm just going to drop that down and in here. And it's still slightly wet, so it's going to just blend down a little bit into that alizarin below. Put it down too much. That comes right up and across the beak here, up into the eye. Very, very small area to paint, so I can't Now we'll just let that dry for a little bit now, as it's just blending in. Take a touch of water, clean brush, and just blend that together there like that. Look, just get that to softly blend in before I put a darker colour onto it later. Coming through here, I'm going to take some raw sienna and just put a thin wash of that up into here. Come down. Let it just blend lightly in. Now, by using it darkly at an edge, by using it a little bit thicker at the edges here, I can then bring it back with some clean water in a moment. So I want to just bring that raw sienna down there, ever so softly, just around the bottom edge here of the chin. And then I'm going to take some clean water and just blend that in with the water. Just blend it into the paper here. Right up to the eye, that's it, around there. So we can barely see the join. And then clean water and just soften it in, so it's not quite pure white. Take the same colour and a little bit thicker, come back here and paint the whole of this. Now this paper I'm testing, s.a.a. gave me a sheet, and so far I'm finding it very pleasant it resists just a little bit at the first coat. So I'm getting a slightly waxy feel at the beginning, but once the paint is on, it's adhering well. So now you see how we've graduated through there. Now while this is still wet, I want to put a slightly richer, darker Indian red here to try and get a feeling of this warmer colour that comes right down the back of the Grebe's ruff here, right up and through here into here, a little bit coming around the edges, little bits into there where it's still just damp, and by letting it fur out a little we can get this feeling of the feathers without even using a different brush, which I'm going to be using later. So very finely with that brush. I want to go darker still, go right back to here. I'm going to drop a bit more, a richer red into that still. I'm going to take some of the alizarin again and mix up with a little bit of the Indian red. Give myself a very warm, drop that in there. You can see just by tickling it in how it's spreading out, giving me this effect. To go stronger still, so more of the same two colours, and I'm still dropping those in quite strongly here. There we go. And I'm going to put a little bit of fluffiness into there later, but you can see I'm just dragging that tip of that brush through a fraction to get the slightly feathery feel, even though it's spreading a bit. Right back to here. There we are. Now the eye has that same colour going on, that rich brown into an orange here. So I'll take a little bit of cadmium orange and just, so if it's a small to paint, just paint that round the eye there, leaving the tiniest touch of white at the top because I want to leave a little bit of light just shining up there. There we are. Now back to here again. I'm going to take some of that warm and just now put a slight glazing in here. So I'm going to use it very thinly. It should be drying to take the paint now. Just put a little bit of this warmth as a glaze across the beak there, look. Now a bit darker, take the same Prussian blue and the burnt sienna again. And we're going to go just a little bit darker under here. So slightly heavier paint at the bottom edge, a little bit darker still. Get the feeling of this Grebe's beak. Right, we'll leave that. We'll leave the eye for the minute, we don't go there yet. I'm going to start coming down this edge of the throat here, and it's very light, so I'm going to put a very thin wash of the raw sienna down here, very thin, almost white, all the way down there to get the paper to work. It's resisting slightly, so I'm having to get it slightly wetter first, and then I'm able to come in and add in along that lower edge just a little bit of yellow, and we'll work into that in a moment, all the way down there. And that comes on. Now here again I want the same thing. I want a variation of golden yellow and browny yellow here, so I'm taking my water and just wetting that paper surface first, because this particular paper is resisting quite a bit. So I'm going to wet the whole of that bird with these lighter tones. I'm having to adjust my painting technique to the material, in other words, as I go along. Now it's a bit yellower down here, so I'm going to take a little bit of chrome yellow and put that across the bird, just mottling it along at the moment. This is my underpainting. You see how different that yellow is to the raw sienna. Not too yellow, but just yellow enough to... There we go, it's coming down to the water's edge here. I'll put some more in there later, right up round the back of the bird here. and I want some of this slightly warmer brown coming around the back of the bird with that yellow. This is giving me my underpainting for it. Comes right down to here. And it's also reflecting into the water. So while it's on my brush, I'm going to paint this yellow just coming into the water down here as well. Reflecting into this water here. A little bit of dry brush work there as I work it across. There we go. That's also dry brushing down here. Just see me pushing the brush across the surface of the paper to get this dry brush effect. Right. Now whilst that's still wet, we want to work into that again to get this slightly furry feel before I start using my textural brushes. So a little bit more of the Indian red, a touch of the alizarin, and we'll just start to bring in some of these warms into the background, let them fluff out here with the wet into wet technique, just letting those lights show. Comes right up there, through here, just fluffing slightly into the edge of the wet into wet neck. Little strokes, just feeling this fluffiness around with wet into wet technique. You see how lovely that is and how it can work and how the paint is doing the job for me. We don't have to copy it exactly. We can get these effects using that same colour down here in the reflection again to get the fluffiness, and we'll let that dry off a little bit. I want to go back into here and I want to use a little bit of purple now, a little bit of purple and my Prussian just to get some of the cooler edges back here. You can see the paper resisting slightly, which is quite nice for the watery effects I want. I think we're going to be able to do quite well with the water for this, with this paint and with this paper. Let's just feel some of these textures working through here and there. The same sort of purple we had up here. Right, there we go. Nice effects we can get. And again we let that dry off a bit. And whilst that's drying a bit, we take some more of the Prussian and we'll just drop some of that in places, little feathery strokes back through here in the background. Just little touches, just letting it flow into the water, the other already wet areas. There we go. Get this lovely effect of one colour into another and over another. Right, let that dry for the moment. Right, now I want to move on to refining that eye. Take a very small brush, and I don't use black, so I'm going to be using the Prussian blue yet again, and a bit of burnt umber to get as dark as I can. Maybe a little touch of the purple as well, just to give it a bit more depth. And we'll just try and get that pupil in here, leaving a little bit of light showing at the top, look. There we go. Maybe just go around the top a fraction, so a very small brush, just to get these little details. There might be a little bit of dark around the outer eye as well. That gives this that shiny area. I'll just find the centre of the beak a bit too here. And with a bit of water, just bring that out, blend it in. I want to work on the head, on the crest, And what I'm going to do there is go back to my medium brush, take some ultramarine blue and put a coat of that, a wash of that on there first of all. You'll see why in a moment. Get this paper going, because I say it does resist quite a bit. That's the only thing I found about this paper so far. It's a little bit irritating in that it resists, but it also will have a useful effect in doing that with the water when I want to dry brush later. So it has its swings and roundabouts, so that's while we're trying this out, isn't it? To find out about these things. Right round here, and then same thing again, dropping down the back of the head here. And let's take some of that deep Prussian blue now. Indigo or Prussian blue will do for this, doesn't matter which really. And mix that with a little bit of the burnt sienna again to make our dark. And we'll drop that all the way down here, right down around here. Get it moving into this paper. Comes up underneath the chin a bit here. Little tiny strokes now. Wash it in there. And using the edge of my brush, we'll just cut in at the tip of the brush to give the furry effect of the edge of this ruff. A bit bigger in places, very chunkier. That's that. Now, while I've still got that dark on my brush, this blue is just starting to dry out a little. I'm going to drop that back into here. You see the lovely effect we get as that mixes in wet into wet into this crest. Comes down to there, dark around that edge, dropping more and more in as I go. There we go. We can come back again and drop a bit more in. I can come back into that in a moment and do a bit more fluffiness with the darks, but not quite yet. I just want a little bit more around this top edge here, just finding. Now on there, clean water on my brush, just take a little bit of this dark on my brush and thin it down and drag it into here, giving this fairy effect for the head. So we start to get a bit more of this texture coming down here. And just into here. There we go. Wet into wet. Bit of water on there, so I just drop that in now to give the fairy effect. And we'll just feel underneath the chin slightly. There we are. Now to carry on down here, so I'm going to make my same colour, the brown and the blue, and come down the neck a bit now. All the way down here, down the centre of it. You can see how that paper's still resisting a bit. Right down into here. And now I'm going to drag that brush into the white like this to start to give the furry, the fluffy feather effect. Coming down there, look. All the way down into there, just breaking it up and breaking it through, back up into here. A little bit of dry brushwork now over the top surfaces because it's a nice paper. It looks like a knot paper, so I'm not quite sure what this is. We'll discuss this more, but I've actually, the s.a.a. gave this to me to try and it's rather fun. But I'm not quite sure what paper it is yet. I quite like it. And we'll just start to bring in these fluffy effects of the darks here. A little bit more water on the brush, because we're going to do some thinner areas as well. Dragging it in, showing these edges of these feathers, like this. great crested grebe on the Norfolk Broads as he swims past. Okay, I'm going to change brushes now. I'm going to start using this one, which is the new rake I've just bought. I'm getting the paint on the end of that, and I just want to get this furriness. It'll do it. This fluffy furriness look of the feathers coming back into here. Right, a little bit warmer, take a little bit of the brown and a wee bit of burnt sienna. A little bit of burnt sienna and a wee bit of the raw sienna together. Again, just dry it off a bit. And when you take this on, it's not stretched. And I want to start getting now a little bit more of the textures of these browns coming across the back. Here we go. Just crisscrossing, and we'll get the effect of these feathers. There we go, look, the fluffiness of these coming up. And into here the same. How fine we can go with this. Lovely little textural work. That's what I liked about this rake when I tested it at the s.a.a. is its fineness, that you can get these very, very fine marks, which are great for grasses and mosses, but are also very good for this sort of work. So if I go around in little patches like that, and little curves, I'll get the edges of the feathers better as well, look. So you can see the effects we can get. Coming around like that. Right down round to the edge of the water. Just dotting it on. Come down to here, a bit more warmth into it, a little bit more of the burnt sienna. We can really start to get some texture on the bird. Back to the dark again. So a useful little brush. I'm glad I got it in my set now to use. We can use it sideways, we can use it downwards, whichever you like. Right, our bird is actually almost done. All we need to do now is to wipe off the masking fluid to continue with this, really. Right, now we come onto the water, and again we need to put some glazes on first. Now there's a little trick we could do here. I'm not going to do it today, but if I mixed some acrylic medium with my watercolour, I could put this wash on and it wouldn't shift afterwards, it wouldn't move afterwards. As it happens, I don't need to do that. I'm going to take some cobalt violet and literally give this a wash all over of that cobalt violet. Right down around the bird, and we'll make use of this paper texture in a moment. Cobalt violet then, all the way over, let those ripples come through. That's it. Now again I'm going to want it to, and as it starts to dry, just at the right time, I have to come into it and start dropping in some cerulean blue and turquoise. Got a very nice turquoise that you know I'm very fond of if you've been watching my other films. Just put a little bit on now, look, to show you it's a beautiful colour. And we're just going to let it, I'm working on the verticals, we're just going to let it spread slightly into here. Little tips of the brush, I'm just using my oval mop, the tip of it, just to paint in and let them work down these streaks of the turquoise, little touches, and then we'll go into more detail in just a moment, knowing how much paint to put on before it's just little touches, otherwise it's going to spread too far. Just little touches of the paint, not too much. We've even got a little bit of it coming into the bird itself here, so we'll just drop a little bit of that cool, that turquoise, to reflect into the bird. Tiniest amount. Now we'll let that dry off. Okay, this paper's now dry enough. Slight dampness to it, nothing much. So I'm going to take my medium round again and come back and start working on these waves. Now, we're on to smaller areas of the waves now. In fact, before I start on my medium round, I'm going to go back to my oval mop. Just take a little bit of the purple. I just want to come down a fraction with this, the purple, and a little touch of actually cerulean now. I used turquoise before, so purple and a little touch of cerulean. Funny mixture, but let's see what we get. Yes, that's quite nice. Maybe a touch of yellow ochre into that, just to make it a slightly more grey colour. There we are. Now I want to get some of these effects of the waves coming through onto here, leaving little bits of light shining through. So we'll just drag the edge of the brush across, tip of the brush, right from the bird all the way, little wavelets, building up this effect of the lights and darks behind, coming out of here. Some of it's larger than others, other areas, quite large areas coming out here, quite a large wave coming up there from here. So we've got quite a nice mixture of a yellowy grey here, the tip of the brush, edge of this lovely mop sideways. The beauty of this is that it gives me the opportunity to use little strokes, fine strokes, as well if I press harder, much larger strokes like that. Leaving little bits of light just shining. There we go. Don't get smaller ones and larger ones. That comes right through from back here. In fact, there's a dark area there that comes all the way through those. I want to get this right all the way through these bits of masking fluid. Let's mix some more paint up again. A little bit of the purple. A little bit of the cerulean blue, a little bit of the raw sienna, coming round here, careful at the edges, don't leave a halo but come right up to the edges like that. If I use my brush that way, look, I can just flick in. The idea of these ripples coming round here, carefully done, right up to the edge of the bird. We do need these darks against the bird now to make the white of that bird stand out. And these colours are going to get a little bit stronger as I go on. You'll see what I'm going to do in a moment, while it's still wet as well. Right round the bird here. Little reflections, all these darks to come right up to the bird, the feeling of this ellipse happening around it. Lovely, using the edge of the brush a bit more now, look, you see, as I paint these larger areas on. There we go. Now while that's still wet, take a quick shot with my camera. While that's still wet, I'm going to make a slightly deeper blue. take a little bit of the Prussian and the ultramarine and just drop in here softly. I'll make it a bit harder in a moment. Just drop in to get some soft effects. A little bit of the Prussian and the ultramarine down into here, right down around the bird while it's still wet. You see this lovely effect we're starting to get now of the lights against the darks. So I'm going slightly softer here, aren't I, in places? Just letting this blend in these background effects of these waves. And you'll see that where I paint wet onto dry, we get a hard edge, and where I paint wet onto wet, we get a soft edge. So as I bring these little ripples and waves through here, where it's dry I'm getting a harder edge, and where it's wet I'm getting a softer edge. I think you start to see the effect I'm after now. And again we've got to let that dry off a bit. Right, we've got the mid-tones in, and now we need to start doing the final darker ones. What I'm going to do now is just remove the masking fluid, and we'll bring back these little bits of white, because I need to go around those with a bit of dark. Same here for the bird, a bit of white under the bird there. And now we will go to that slightly smaller brush, the medium one. And I'm going to make up a similar colour to what I was doing before, but this time with the ultramarine with some raw sienna, which will give me that slightly yellowy, just off the green, slightly darker wash, which I can now put over this, working up to the bird. Let that come down and in, and you notice now it's the wet paint on the dry paper which is giving me a harder edge to my lines, so I can paint in more detail. Slightly broken effects for the ripples coming outwards here. I'm going to go darker yet in places around the bird to help silhouette it out. Building up the watercolour in layers. Dark behind here, coming up under these feathers. Work those feathers in now. Quite a big stroke there, which is breaking down then into the wavelets as it comes out here. You see I'm using a little bit of dry brushwork now as well. In other words, I'm just letting the brush drag across the paper a bit here. We don't want to make outlines, but we'll just break this neck up a little by adding a slight line to the edge of it in places. Now, I was talking about these bubbles earlier. To make it a little bit more purple. A bit of browning. Burnt sienna into it now. So I want some real darks again. I'll just look at these darks here and fluffiness bits again, and also around these bubbles, because there's something we haven't yet done. These little light areas of the bubbles here, I do want to get those showing a bit more now. There were some little bubbles, little strokes. We could use that small rake brush, but I'm just trying to get away with using this brush for these final few strokes. Just darkening down a few bits here and there. Now the paint has sunk, which watercolour of course will. We know that that watercolour is going to sink slightly. So, and our bird is almost there, and you saw how quickly we produced that. Final reflections and darks going in. Put a little bit of the warm back in a minute as well. Just a little bit of warm. Take some raw sienna. Just come back in with that warm. Maybe a touch of, maybe a little bit yellower, a little touch of cadmium orange coming in here. And there's our painting of the grebe, done fairly easily. I don't do any warmer than that. It's good enough. So a small brush. And we'll just put a little signature right